Hey everyone, welcome back to Audio Legend. I'm your host, Ray Coles. If you're hunting for real value in vintage hi-fi, instead of just chasing big brand names, you're in the right place. Today we're breaking down 10 legendary speaker brands, looking at current used market prices, restoration realities, and the real engineering truth behind each ranking. We'll go from the most overpriced to the absolute best value so you can make smarter buying decisions. Stick around until the end because I'll share some practical tips on what to look for and what to avoid so you can get great sound without wasting money. Let's dive right in. Number 10, Bose. Bose built one of the most recognizable names in audio, and on the vintage side, the 901 is the speaker that pretty much everyone knows. It uses 9 identical 4 5-inch full range drivers bouncing sound off your walls to create this super wide stereo image. The concept is genuinely unique and pretty clever for its time. But here's the problem, it's all about what it cost you in the end. A clean pair of 901 Series 6 right now sells for around $400 to $700 on the used market. Sounds okay at first until you realize these speakers need a dedicated Bose equalizer to actually work properly. Lose that EQ or pick one up with corroded pots and the whole system becomes basically useless. Then you've got the drivers. All 9 of them per cabinet usually need refoam. At $50 to $80 each plus labor, your real cost can easily climb past $1,000 to $1,500 before you even hear a single note. Sonically, it's wide but very diffuse. The imaging feels vague compared to traditional direct radiating designs, and even with all that driver surface area, the bass rolls off sharply below 50 Hz. Bose sold millions of these through heavy marketing and those famous department store demos, and that brand power still keeps prices inflated today. You're mostly paying for the famous logo, not the engineering. From my own experience testing a few pairs, they can sound fun in the right room, but for the same $600, brands much higher on this list deliver tighter bass, sharper imaging, and zero headaches with old equalizers. Bose made some really clever speakers. They just never made true $600 speakers. Klipsch. And now let's talk about a brand that has one of the most passionate and loyal followings in the entire vintage audio world, Klipsch. Paul W. Klipsch was a real innovator. Back in 1946, he designed the famous Klipsch horn, a fully horn-loaded speaker with bass, mid-range, and treble, all using horn technology for maximum efficiency. These things are legendary for how loud they can get with almost no power. A Klipsch horn can easily hit over 100 decibels with just a few watts from a small tube amplifier. That's the kind of performance most modern speakers still dream about. The whole Heritage series, including the La Scala, Cornwall, Heresy, and the big Klipsch horn, follows exactly the same design philosophy. They deliver big, dynamic, fast, and punchy sound that feels alive in the room. When you listen to a good pair, the speed of the horns makes drums snap and guitars jump out in a way that a lot of vintage box speakers simply can't match. They're especially fantastic with lower powered amplifiers and for genres like rock, jazz, blues, or anything that needs energy and impact. Many people say once you hear the Heritage series, it's hard to go back to conventional designs. But here's where things get tricky when we talk about value. The price tag on the used market has become pretty extreme. Right now, a decent pair of original Klipsch horns in good condition sells anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000. La Scalas are typically in the $2,000 to $4,000 range, and even the smaller Heresy models are pulling $800 to $1,200 depending on condition and version. These prices have basically doubled in just the last 5 years. And a big part of that jump comes from collector hype and nostalgia rather than pure sonic improvements over time. At $2,000 for a pair of La Scalas, you're now competing directly with several brands that appear much higher on this list, brands that cost a quarter of the price while giving you comparable or sometimes better overall balance for daily listening. Don't get me wrong, Klipsch speakers sound incredible. They're dynamic, exciting, and have that special live-like presence. But right now, they also cost an incredible amount of money. If you're on a budget and looking for the smartest performance per dollar spent, there are definitely better value options waiting further up this ranking. From my own time testing different Heritage models, they shine brightest in larger rooms where their efficiency and dynamics can really breathe. In smaller spaces, they can sometimes feel overpowering. So before you pull the trigger on a big Klipsch purchase, think carefully about your room size and what kind of music you listen to most. That's the real key to getting the most out of them. Cerwin-Vega. Next up we have Cerwin-Vega, a brand that built its entire reputation on one very clear strength: massive, room-shaking bass. In the 1970s, the D series, especially the popular D9, became the go-to party speaker for a whole generation of music lovers. These speakers came loaded with big 15-inch woofers, very high sensitivity ratings, and huge cabinets that were practically the size of end tables. If you wanted loud and you wanted it to hit hard and deep, Cerwin-Vega delivered like almost nothing else available at the time. They were incredibly popular in college dorms, house parties, and clubs because they could fill a room with serious low-end energy without needing a giant amplifier. Their high sensitivity meant even modest receivers could make them roar. A lot of people still have fond memories of these speakers from their younger days, and that nostalgia is still driving demand today. And now let's get real about the limitations. The main issue with most Cerwin-Vega D-series models is that loud was basically their entire pitch. The mid-range often sounds recessed and a little unrefined, while the tweeters can become harsh and fatiguing once you turn up the volume. Looking at frequency response measurements on even the best examples, you'll see noticeable dips right through the important vocal range, exactly where more balanced designs stay smooth and natural. This makes them less ideal for critical listening or vocal-heavy music. Then there's the practical problem. Almost every owner eventually faces the foam surrounds. Almost every woofer from this era has rotted by now. A proper refoam job typically costs $60 to $90 per driver. Because most models use 2 or 3 woofers per cabinet, you're easily looking at $200 to $500 or more in restoration costs before you even count the original purchase price. Clean, fully working pairs today usually sell between $300 and $800 depending on the exact model and condition. That price is mostly supported by nostalgia and the dedicated basshead community rather than all-around sonic excellence. Cerwin-Vega speakers do one thing extremely well. They deliver powerful, fun, chest-thumping bass that can be addictive at parties. But in 2026, when several brands higher on this list do everything well, bass, mids, highs, and imaging for noticeably less money, paying $800 just for that one strength starts to feel like a questionable deal. From my experience testing restored pairs, they can still be a blast in the right setting, especially if you mostly listen loud and want that physical impact. But for everyday critical listening or a more balanced system, there are clearly better all-round performers available at similar or lower prices. Always factor in the restoration budget before you buy. Pioneer. Here, a brand that most people know for its fantastic vintage receivers, but many completely overlook when it comes to speakers, and that's honestly a big mistake if you pick the right models. Pioneer actually made some seriously impressive speakers back in the day. Take the CS series, for example. The 1975 CS. 99A is a proper 3-way floor standard featuring a big one, 5-inch woofer, a horn-loaded mid-range, and a ribbon tweeter. It was designed from the ground up to go head-to-head with heavy hitters like JBL and Klipsch, and it still holds up really well today. Another standout is the 1976 HPM 100. This one offers an impressively flat frequency response that can easily rival speakers costing twice as much on the used market right now. When you find a good pair, the sound is clean, detailed, and well balanced, with surprising authority in the bass for its size. But here's the catch that keeps Pioneer from ranking higher consistency across the lineup is all over the place. For every excellent CS, 99A or HPM 100 that sells in the $200 to $500 range, there are easily 10 budget S-series models or cheap pack-in speakers that were made just to bundle with receivers. Those thinner sounding ones often lack real low-end presence and can feel weak and uninspiring. The key is knowing exactly which models to hunt for. I always recommend checking detailed guides or forums for serial numbers, original specs, and user experiences before buying. Do your homework, and Pioneer can deliver some of the best value in vintage audio. A clean, restored pair of HPM 100S or CS 99 as gives you performance that punches well above its price tag. On the flip side, if you buy blind without researching, you might end up with a $200 speaker that performs more like a $50 one. That risk is what holds the brand back from the top spots. Still, for smart buyers who know what they're looking for, Pioneer remains one of the smartest ways to get great sound without spending a fortune. In my experience, when you land the right model, it's an absolute joy. With a good Pioneer or Marantz receiver, warm, musical, and surprisingly capable. Just remember, research is your best friend with this brand, Infinity. Now we move on to Infinity, a brand that really pushed speaker technology further than almost anyone else on this list. Founded in 1968 by Arnie Nudell, the company jumped straight into exciting experiments with electromagnetic planar drivers, those famous EMIT tweeters, and even servo-controlled subwoofers. Some of their reference standard systems were incredibly ambitious for the time. The best models, like the Kappa series and the higher-end reference line, still sound impressive today. They deliver detailed, fast, and wonderfully open sound that many conventional Conan Dome speakers from the same era struggle to match. In particular, the EMIT tweeter gives Infinity an airy, high-frequency clarity and sparkle that very few vintage brands can touch. When everything aligns, these speakers can sound incredibly refined and revealing. Now, here's the big value challenge with Infinity. The lineup is wildly inconsistent. A good pair of Kappa 9S can sell for $800 to $1,500 and genuinely deliver world-class performance that holds up against much more expensive modern speakers. But on the other end, some budget models like the Reference 3s only go for $100 to $200 and often sound thin and hollow by comparison. Unlike the top 4 brands on this list, Infinity doesn't have a really solid, reliable floor across their entire range. That makes buying them a bit of a gamble. If you do your research and target the right models, especially the Kappa series or top reference versions, then Infinity can be an absolute steal and a fantastic find. The upside is massive when you get a good pair. However, if you buy blind without knowing the differences, the risk is equally real. You could end up disappointed. From my own listening sessions, the better Infinity models shine with clean electronics and good source material, revealing layers of detail you don't always hear from other vintage brands. But the weaker ones can leave you wanting more body and warmth. So while Infinity brought some truly forward-thinking technology to the table, the inconsistency is what keeps them at number 6 on this value ranking. Know what you're getting and you'll be rewarded. Altec Lansing. Altec Lansing brings professional studio and theater heritage, Voice of the Theater series, to the home market. Models like the A7, Valencia, or 604 Duplex offer horn-loaded efficiency, strong dynamics, and that classic live West Coast presence with excellent mid-range projection for vocals and instruments. They're built like tanks for pro use, with durable drivers and good parts availability, though horns and networks may need service. Clean pairs often land in the $300, $1,000 plus range, depending on model, size, but many bargains exist in estate sales. Restoration can be straightforward for experienced hands. They shine in larger rooms or with lower power amps, offering strong value for those who love efficient, high output sound without extreme collector premiums. Not as refined for critical listening as some sealed designs, but punchy and fun, great if you prioritize presence over absolute neutrality. And now we come to a brand that really deserves more attention from today's vintage buyers, KLH. This was Henry Kloss's first company after he left Acoustic Research in 1957. Along with his partners, he set out to bring real high fidelity sound to normal people at prices they could actually afford. One of their standout models is the 1967 Model 5. It uses a 10-inch acoustic suspension woofer paired with a direct radiating tweeter, all housed in a compact sealed cabinet. Thanks to that acoustic suspension design, it delivers surprisingly deep and well-controlled bass for its relatively small size. This is the perfect example of classic East Coast, sound warm, full-bodied, and smooth through the mid-range, with accurate reproduction that never gets boomy or exaggerated. It focuses on musical truth rather than flashy volume. On the used market today, original KLH Model 5s typically sell for $200 to $400 a pair, which feels very fair for what you get. The smaller Model 6s and 17s are even more affordable, often going for $75 to $150. Because KLH used standard driver sizes that are still common, refoaming or replacing parts is straightforward and not too expensive. The only real limitation is that KLH had a narrower lineup compared to the top 3 brands on this list. They didn't make many large floor-standing models that could go toe-to-toe with the biggest JBLs or ARs in huge rooms. But what they did build was genuinely excellent and remains very affordable. For anyone who wants accurate, musical, and enjoyable sound without spending a fortune, KLH offers some of the strongest value in vintage audio right now. Advent. Next up is Advent, another Henry Kloss creation that delivered incredible bang for the buck. After leaving KLH in 1967, Klaus founded Advent with one clear mission: build a speaker that sounded as good as the best on the market, but sell it for about half the price. The 1969 large Advent absolutely nailed that goal. It features a 10-inch acoustic suspension woofer combined with a 1-inch dome tweeter in a simple, elegant walnut cabinet. No exotic drivers, no overly complicated crossovers, just fundamentally correct engineering done right. It was the first speaker under $200 to earn strong top-tier recommendations from major audio publications, and it went on to outsell nearly everything else during the 1970s. Today, clean pairs of the large Advent typically sell for $150 to $300. The smaller Advent models are even cheaper, often landing between $75 and $150. These speakers reach down into the low 40s for bass, with a natural and uncolored mid-range plus smooth, non-fatiguing treble. Refoaming the woofer is inexpensive, usually $30 to $50 per driver, and the job is quick and beginner-friendly. Because Advent sold hundreds of thousands of these speakers back in the day, good clean pairs are still relatively easy to find if you keep your eyes open at estate sales, online marketplaces, or local listings. In my opinion, there is no speaker on this entire list that gives you more pure sound quality per dollar spent than a well-maintained large Advent at today's prices. The best value in vintage speakers isn't some rare unicorn. It's sitting out there in plain sight, waiting for smart buyers. Acoustic Research. AR didn't just make great speakers. They actually invented the technology that made so many great vintage speakers possible in the first place. Back in 1954, Edgar Vilcher and Henry Kloss founded the company and patented the acoustic suspension design. Instead of using a big ported cabinet to get bass, they sealed the box completely and used the trapped air inside as a kind of spring. This let them achieve deep, accurate, and tight bass from a cabinet that was only about half the size of traditional designs. One of the all-time classics is the 1967 AR-3A. It features a 12-inch acoustic suspension woofer, a dome mid-range, and a dome tweeter, all packed into a relatively small sealed cabinet of roughly 2 cubic feet. To this day, many people still consider it one of the finest loudspeakers of the 20th century. The sound is beautifully neutral, balanced, and detailed. It holds up remarkably well even against modern speakers that cost 10 times more. On the used market right now, good AR3 pairs usually sell for $300 to $600, while the smaller AR2AX models go for around $100 to $200. Parts are still widely available, and there is a huge active restoration community around these speakers, which makes servicing them much easier than many other vintage models. AR sits at number 2 because the engineering is truly foundational, the sound is timeless, and the prices have not yet caught up to the legendary reputation. That gap between reputation and current pricing is exactly where smart buyers can win big. If you want neutral, accurate sound that focuses on the music rather than adding its own color, AR is hard to beat at these prices. Yeah, bull. And finally, number 1, JBL. JBL sits at the very top of this list because no other vintage speaker brand delivers such a complete package of great sound quality, wide model range, easy parts availability, and strong resale value. James Bulla Lansing, who had already founded Altec Lansing before starting JBL in 1946, built the company on professional studio monitor technology that later trickled down beautifully into home speakers. The 1970 L100 became the best-selling hi-fi loudspeaker in American history. It features a 12-inch woofer, a 5-inch mid-range, and a 1.5-inch dome tweeter sitting behind that famous orange foam grille. The sound is classic West Coast dynamic, punchy, and forward, with a strong mid-range presence that makes vocals and guitars really jump out of the mix. It pairs perfectly with warm receivers like Marantz or Pioneer, especially when you're spinning vinyl records. But the value goes much deeper than just that one famous model. Other excellent options like the L36, L50, and L112 all deliver strong performance and typically sell for $150 to $400 a pair. The L100 itself goes for $400 to $800 depending on condition and version. Because of JBL's professional heritage, the drivers were built tough and can handle real power for years without failing. Replacement parts such as diaphragms, crossover capacitors, and foam surround kits are still manufactured and widely available today. Restoring a JBL is one of the most straightforward jobs in vintage audio. On top of everything else, JBL holds its resale value better than almost any other brand on this list. You can buy them, enjoy them for years, and when you decide to sell, you'll usually get most of your money back. No other vintage speaker brand checks every single box the way JBL does. That is exactly why it earns the #1 spot on this ranking. Brand recognition and sound quality per dollar are completely different things. Bottom brands make good speakers but poor deals. Top ones prove smart money beats hype every time. Hit like if this changed how you shop vintage. Comment, Team Advent, AR, or JBL? Which surprised you? Subscribe to Audio Legend for more. Ray Coles here, breaking down the hi-fi market weekly so you buy smarter and listen better. The best speakers aren't always the priciest, sometimes the ones nobody told you about. See you next time.